Hello, and welcome to the July 11th edition of the Fintech Book Club. My name is Stessa Cohen, and I'm part of our team here today. Um, Recurring team of the Fintech Book Club, of which you are now a part because you are a guest on the Fintech Book Club. So we wanted to start uh, today's book club acknowledging the recent passing of our founding member, Barb McLean. As some of you may know, she recently passed away. And, as I said, she was a founding member. And we started this thing at Finovate Fall a couple of years ago, right? Um, After she was on a panel with Theo and some others around the metaverse. And Theo and her co-author had just published a book, and I just gotten a copy of it, and we were standing around talking because I think it was the first time that we met in person, that we've known each other. All of us have known each other for quite a while, and I suggested, hey, let's start a book club, and hey, let's do it online. Um, I'd had a great experience in another book club having nothing to do with fintech or tech or anything about technology. And I just thought it would be great because it got me to read all these books that otherwise I would have like, oh, too boring or too much work. And in fact, it has. And Barb was right there enthusiastically pushing us. And I had known Barb when I was at a previous employer, and she had worked for a client. Um, so I gotten to know her a little bit that way. But being in the book club, we naturally got to know each other and more. And, you know, I myself, and I know the book club, we already miss her so much. I've put up a ticker at the bottom of your screen for a GoFundMe that's been set up for Barb's family to help get them through, um, you know, the upcoming days and months. And if you can, please donate. And we'll put the link in the video after the book club discussion. Who wants to go next? Effie?
I'm happy to go next. This is really a sad moment. As you said, we already miss Barb. We not only miss her at the Fintech Book Club, she was the founder, the creator of the infamous Fintech playlist. Any of us that create content, especially blogs, were awaiting weekly her pick, whether she would include our article. Like kids, we wanted to be selected. We waited for what song would be matched. And this is a reminder again of the fragility of our life. It's also a reminder that yes, we are all online, questioning whether relationships are real or fake or superficial. But I feel that although I met Barb in person, I think 3 times through this connection, but just the energy. I've had her guest on my podcast. We've shared so many moments. In my mind, she had an angelic face in a sort of appearance that I didn't expect when I met her in person. And I suggest we take 1 minute of silence just to honor her. Thank you. Jim, over to you.
Oh, Effie, thank you for causing us to pause for just a moment because one of the things that I think that moment that Stessa brought up at Finovate when we were all together in that in-person experience, one of the things it also reminded me of is how quick life has gone since that moment. So much has happened in our industry, in our personal lives, in our collective lives. And the one thing that Barb always kind of reminded me to do was to be present, be present with each other, uh, because she could cut through the BS better than anybody I
Yes.
knew.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely one of the things that I will miss, because she had this like laser vision of being able to kind of cut right to the heart of things. But the other thing that always impressed me, and I will definitely miss, is her ability to respect your an opinion that she didn't agree with. I mean, she would tell you absolutely if there was something that she totally disagreed with, but she would do it in a way that wasn't trying to change your mind. It was respectful sharing. And that's what she brought to this book club as well, because we all bring our own unique perspectives to these books that we review and read and share. And we do it in a way that honors those respectful kind of views. So,
Yeah.
yeah, today's hard. Today is hard because I'm definitely feeling that absence.
Yeah. And really, what we've created is a community for people to ask questions that, looking for answers that maybe we don't agree with, and for us to disagree, but respectfully, because that's how we grow as humans, as organizations, as financial institutions, wherever. I think that's really important, and she definitely brought that, and enhanced our discussions. And if you want to see her in action in the FinTech Book Club, you can go to the page and follow, and go see some previous discussions. I think the last one she was at was in January, maybe. Um, and definitely go back and you can see what she was made of, which is exactly as Jim was saying. Um, so lastly, before we start, we just wanted to mention that we are going to be at Finovate Fall NYC on September 7th, doing a FinTech Book Club, actually live in person. We're going to be discussing um, all of the books that we've read so far, thematically, and doing some analysis and discussion that way. Um, Theodora Lau will be our moderator, and if you're attending, we invite you to join us there. Um, as we get started now, um, you can please put your questions and comments in on LinkedIn, and they'll show up, and we can answer them live. So our book today is Ethos in Banking by Rik Coeckelbergs. I hope I got his name correct.
Stetson,
Um,
one of the things I'll say real quickly, Rick had mentioned that he was going to be observing
oh,
this.
the pressure.
I know the pressure is on because he's really anxious to hear what we thought of his book and what
Yeah,
our big takeaways are. So again, I hope we'll see
yeah.
his
So,
comment.
yeah. So, Rick, if you're here, feel free to comment and add to the discussion. Anybody, if you haven't read the book, feel free to comment and discuss. A new ethos in banking. I think appropriate um, for today, um, and also a new framework for understanding where financial services is going, whether financial institutions go there or not. I think it's a framework for understanding how financial institutions should be looking at their strategies and evaluating technology. Discuss.
Well, one of the things I'm going to jump right in because one of the things that didn't occur to me until probably just a couple of days ago is this was a situation where I was using a digital copy of his book rather than a physical copy. And consequently, I hadn't really paid attention to the cover of the book. And it was only after watching an interview that Rik had given that all of a sudden I noticed the scale on the cover of the book, which suggests an imbalance between our view of money, our view of empathy, our views, and the kind of framework that he offers up in this book about ethos, pathos, and logos. Those three parts of a triangle that form, a solid business strategy. Um, Even the cover of the book is suggesting that we should look at the fact that there's an imbalance going on right now, that without an effort to bring those items back into balance, we're going to be missing significant opportunities in the digital age.
Effie, did you?
I'd like to, yeah, uh, to highlight two thoughts that Rik has shared in his book that resonate a lot, and I think set the scene for what he describes later, the triangle that Jim mentioned, and the related trust, different forms of trust that are related to this triangle. He really goes into to depth because before reading this book, just from the cover of the book or the title, I would have thought, okay, this is about ethics, right? But it is not. That's like really scratching the surface. And this, I want to set the scene as Rik reminds us that banking used to be a people's business in the old days, so to speak, the traditional days. And now, with all the transformation of the last 2 decades, mobile, cloud, and now we're going to AI, it feels more like a transactional business. And there, I'd love to add my personal hashtag, which is, and the irony is, uh, because really uh, this is not where you're going to differentiate by offering better, cheaper, faster transactions, because eventually everybody can do that. Everybody can copy you. So, where is the differentiation? That's the way I like to think of it. And also, a reminder that banking is all about risk management, whether it's operational, whether it's market related, it's all about risk management. So, combining those two with the qualitative forms of trust that Rik really dives into is paramount. How do you combine this? And he gives brilliant examples. I love the practical cases that he presented of banks that really lost their ethos, because ethos, as he says, and I really, this has stayed with me, ethos is not something that the bank can define. It is determined by the audience, so to speak, and the audience is customers, stakeholders, and so on. That's a reminder. It's not the mission statement. Yes, a bank, a business can set a mission statement, but that's not what defines the ethos. That has really, that qualitative differentiation that he insists on and supports with all his examples and evidence is remarkable. I really, I'm not going to say that the Greek banks disaster was my favorite example. I'm going to pick on. Actually, when I read it, I was hearing my voice criticizing what he was saying. Right, I was looking for parts where it wasn't accurate, his interpretation. But I think that the best example is the Polish um, bank disaster during 2008 with loans, mortgages they had issued in Swiss francs, and the debacle of the foreign exchange, and how something that initially appeared to help people fulfill their dreams of a mortgage and accessibility, it backfired. And then you have these questions of who has the responsibility, how do you rebuild ethos, and so on. And I'll stop there, and maybe you guys can add to these points that I touched on.
Yeah, well, I agree with you in a large part. And first, one of my first questions after reading the ethos section was sort of like hearing that banker voice. Well, how is this different from our mission statement? We have a mission statement. This is our mission. It has our values in there. And I don't necessarily agree with that, but I just hear that in the back that we have that. And I wonder if bankers can hear this about ethos. What are your true values when they hear that we have a mission statement? Um, and I know even community banks and credit unions are in a better position to understand this, but still, do they hear it? Do they really take their values and put it out there? I mean, in trying to compete in the financial services, especially the banking world, do they abandon, oh, we don't need to talk about our values because we have to compete with these retail banks? And kind of missing the point that you can, because you're not a retail bank. You know, there's a community bank in my neighborhood that does so much good in terms of funding additional housing and other kinds of things that, I feel like they need to toot their horn and show, we're in your neighborhood and we're helping businesses grow. I know one of the company, local businesses that they funded a long time ago just celebrated 20 years in business, a coffee shop. They survived the financial crisis. They survived
COVID.
pandemic. Yeah, being closed, and a large part of that was due to a bank. So
One of the things that I experience in terms of some of our clients across the country, the community banks, credit unions that I've had the privilege to work with, oftentimes the the activity of putting together a mission vision statement that tries to capture at least their sense of purpose, the reason for doing things, there's a quality of that that's almost like checking something off the list. They don't necessarily move it forward in terms of every decision they make relative to their customer experience,
right,
every decision they make about where capital is going to be expended in this next quarter, in this next year. And one of the things that often happens inside of what I call that banking bubble, where you can get so focused on the daily operations and so focused on making sure you're hitting all those regulatory buttons, etc., is you miss the fact that the consumer, I mean, there's a real kind of trust and reputation crossroads right now, I think, for the industry,
yeah,
for so many banks, and especially the community-based institutions sometimes underestimate the degree to which their operations end up getting splattered by the bad behavior of a larger institution. I think back a couple of years ago when Wells was always in the news for this bad
Bad.
thing or that bad thing. In the consumer's mind, that was kind of painting the industry with a broad brushstroke. And it's like, wow, if that's going on over here, I wonder if that's going on in my neighborhood bank, in my community bank, in my credit union, etc. And and so kind of recalibrating to think about how are we emphasizing our own credibility? How are we supporting a perception of our character as an institution
yeah, yeah,
through our customer experience and all the rest? So that, bringing that ethos filter back into balance seems like it makes a tremendous amount of sense to me.
yeah, yeah. And it seems like, this is not only talking about a framework, but saying, hey, you need to look at your organization. And just as like Lita Liptus's book was about, hey, your organizations have to change. You can't just say, hey, Stessa, go get us some more women because you're a woman. You have to change the organization. He's saying, hey, you have to look at the balance. If you're all about logos and, profitability is important, but it's not the only thing. Logos isn't the only thing that drives profitability, right? If people, small businesses, corporations, consumers feel that you're a bank without values, that you're only after their money, you know, that's hard to change because, as Effie mentioned, it's all about how people perceive you. It's like
Yeah,
it's
it's like your character, your identity, right? As an organization, it goes beyond your values. It's how you carry yourself, how you treat each other, even how you treat your suppliers, your vendors, your contractors. Everything matters in
yeah,
this, and we tend to forget that, and we look at just NPS scores and things like that.
yeah, yeah,
Let me add something real quick, just for the purpose of bringing our audience up to speed a little bit, about Rik's basic kind of framework that he offers up in the book. You hear us talking about ethos and pathos and logos. I mean, he refers to that in his book as this rhetorical triangle. And of course, ethos is all about credibility and character. Pathos is all about emotion and empathy. And logos is about logic and reasoning. And saying again, we have to bring all of those uh, into balance in order to support. I always remember from school in geometry that the triangle is like the strongest architectural kind of shape because of the way when you have something in balance like that, it's going to support each other, right? Um, and so there's a lot of the metaphor of using that kind of triangular rhetorical framework there to really think about framing strategy.
yeah. And on the logos part, it's not just about numbers. It's like the increasing complexity, using logic and reason of products, creating products that you are transparent, are very complex. Who among us reads their mortgage documents? Who among us understands them? Okay, I did, and they were really pissed off when I did because I read every page, I read every line, and it took longer. But I'm not susceptible to somebody saying, "Hey, sign it." So, you know, why can't we have less complex products that people understand and they understand the implications of what they're signing and can have more transparency into what the product is doing and how it works? Things like adjustable rate mortgages that depends on interest rates that are beyond the banks and the consumer's control. I mean, that's a lot of people got mortgages that way, but a lot of people lose their homes. And that's kind of problematic. The other example is I worked with a bank a couple of years ago in Ethiopia that had 150 products. A retail bank, 150.
Right.
So
Part of
it's just on the
I
retail
mean,
side.
yeah, Rick remarks at some point in the book that really in the digital era, nothing's been really reinvented. It's just digitizing existing processes and products. And I totally agree. It's only in the blockchain space that we're seeing something innovative in terms of manufacturing something different. And we're not there yet. But everything
Yeah,
else in the neobanks and everything, it's just digitized existing products. And your example of mortgages, Stessa, is a great one. Yes, you might get approved faster, and maybe because mortgages are difficult in terms of the ecosystem that's required, you need less paperwork, but at the end of the day, it remains to be a complex product that a lot of people misunderstand. Right? It's not an easy one. I mean, I one of my favorite parts of Rik's book is about his metaphor of Mary Poppins, and I love Mary Poppins for many reasons. And he talks about, hey, why don't bankers try to sort of be a Mary Poppins in the sense of bringing some magic to what they do. And what's also interesting is Mary Poppins was always about focused on the children, not on herself, right? And solving problems with a little bit of magic, a touch of magic there. And imagine if banks can do that for customers. And that's actually where I think this book connects with the customer innovation book we read of
Exactly. Exactly.
Taylor and
I,
Wallace, right? Go ahead.
yeah, well, he mentions them as well, and it dovetails exactly what they were talking about. You can better serve your customers if you actually go in the field and talk to them about their dreams, their problems, see how they're using the products that they have, the devices that they have, and what they need to be able to do. It's and that just, for me, the interconnectedness of the books that we read, it kind of builds on one another. And I think, reading this book, but also reading Customer Centric Innovation in Finance by Taylor and Brologe is good. And reading Lita's book, Bankers Like Us, and Theo's book, and Banking as a Service, and even, you know, on, the book that we read on digital assets, David Birch's book, they all kind of connect up. And so it's like one without the other. It's really important, I think, as bankers and strategists to get a big picture, a picture outside of your bank of, like, what's a new way to look at our strategy. You know, if the CEO or the CTO is coming in and saying we have to do more AI, like, what problem are we solving?
Right. I was going to say, I mean, the one of the big takeaways of not only this book, but as you mentioned, that's a lot of the books that we've been looking at recently, is that digital transformation is incomplete without human ethos. Period. End of sentence. Because the digital experience, as Effie, you just mentioned, somebody can differentiate with that today, but then everybody else is going to have it. That window keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And so at
Yep.
some point, knowing that as consumers, we're spending more of our lives in digital space, that's not likely to change. What we have to start thinking about is digitally enabled empathy. How is your digital experience going to feel more human? How is your
Yes.
human experience going to kind of support the digital experience? None of that happens if you're making your decisions through a bank centric filter.
And
Unless,
Stessa makes a good point in before we were talking about customer loyalty. How do you build customer loyalty in this world, right? In the world that you described, Jim.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think one of the points that he brings up is that it's not only financial inclusion, but digital inclusion too. That
right,
there are two parts to this, and digital transformation can't just be digitizing everything, but how do you include people in it? Um, uh, Back in the mid 2010s, I first started writing about empathy in banking when I was at a former employer. You can go search for it. Um, and, already it was like changing my way of looking at digital transformation, like new ways of finding products and services to build. And I've expanded on some of that in terms of the work I've done around hidden tribes. what are people's needs that may not be, and Rik gets this in his book, in the traditional demographics. What are individuals' needs? You know, um, somebody who's 25 may have some similarities with somebody who's 45 or 65, but it's not evident in the traditional demographic. And unless you go and talk to them, or you open your ways of getting this new information, you can't get that balance between how do we make more money, how do we create products that are differentiating, and how do we, you know, appeal to the emotions of our customers. Hey, we got stuff that you want and it's going to solve this problem. And how do we express that, our values? We one great example that occurred to me recently was around buy now, pay later, which now is going to be reported on your credit score in the US. And I responded, I think it was Brian Claggett posted about it. And I said, banks really need a service that, helps people manage their buy now, pay later accounts. Instead of just giving them tips or say, don't do too many of these, which doesn't help anybody. How about helping people manage it in some way? Have it be an opt in and say, hey, you know, combine all of these and the bank will pay it off and then you repay this loan to the bank or whatever it is. I don't want to prescribe anything. And sure enough, somebody came forward and said, hey, we're working on that. And but those kinds of things are innovative and digital, and not just in digital terms, but hey, if I went into the branch, would the branch person know to say, hey, you've got a lot of, you're paying out to a lot of different buy now, pay later accounts. We could help you with that if for some reason you went to a branch. Um, so I think that capacity is there. I wonder if banks are willing to do this. Are they, as Rick mentioned, they've lost the plot? Are they focused too much on value extraction rather than value creation? Is that energy of value creation in the banks?
Yes, Tessa. I mean, we were also talking about this before we went live. I feel that, especially in the US, there's a big portion of the banking sector that is in survival mode and therefore incapable of thinking about these aspects, the emotional aspect, the value aspect, the emotional capital, or even the human capital. That's what I'm afraid that is happening and is the reality. Of course, that doesn't hold for and more uh, larger, I guess, institutions, and yet we don't see from them a leading example. Um, I'm looking at my notes because I've also a highlight that I want to share
I'm sure.
from the book is Rick's. Um, he talks about uh, economic capital and human capital. Of course, that's important, but also about spiritual capital. And this is borrowing from a philosopher and management author, Dana Zohar. Honestly, I hadn't heard of him, and I really loved what he's saying. He's saying that there's five layers that a bank, a financial institution, could draw from in terms of weaving storytelling and changing their identity. And those are um, the company, the society, the customer, the team, and themselves. So it's like, can you weave these together? It's like this ecosystem. And then look at this triangle that we were talking earlier, instead of just the numbers. Um, can we do that? And I like to think of it, especially in retail banking, how much have even the neobanks helped people reduce delinquency rates, get out of trouble when they lose their jobs, for example. These are real things that are happening in the society, right? How much I don't care whether XYZ neobank is growing because maybe it's Peter stealing from Paul, or Paul, whatever the saying is, Paul stealing from Peter, right? Yes, that's okay. It's competition. But are they changing these hard facts in the society, right? Where we default on mortgages, we're delinquent, we lose our jobs, we are in financial trouble. Do we get help?
I think
I go ahead.
oh, I think we've talked for a long time in the industry, anyway, about one of the ways that fintech and digital only banks were able to kind of explode on the scene so dramatically was because they presented a purpose driven kind of banking that was so focused on a customer pain point that it gave them a competitive edge. You know, it's like people could see, oh, they're helping me address a real issue in my life. Um, and of course, now that there's this kind of industry wide balancing where you have fintechs not only partnering with banks, but banks buying fintechs, fintechs buying banks. It's like there's an identity crisis almost underway in the industry. And the thing that I keep thinking though from Rik's book is that the case has is out there that ethos, we need to pay attention to it, we need to balance it out, et cetera, et cetera. But we need an operational translation. You know, there needs to be a handbook. You know, how do you do that? How do you build like ethical banking into your pricing models, into your channel strategy, into AI deployment, as an example, into your loan underwriting? Without that, again, it becomes, you know, here's your mission statement stuck on your website over here, and that's as far as it goes.
Well, part of it is regulation, right? Part of it is regulation that encourages financial institutions to not discriminate by gender or race or religion, those kinds of things. And then other bodies that allow people to complain about financial institutions. In the US, it's the Consumer Finance Protection Board.
Protection Bureau, right?
Um, and I think the thing that helps drive this continued unbalance in the United States is that that organization, which is kind of neo governmental, is effectively neutered right now. I know there are pros and cons in all directions from folks in financial services, but they did do some substantial work um, helping consumers address big complaints, financial complaints about banks in the US. And without that support, it becomes much harder to balance that out. Because I think in large organizations, something that happens, say, in consumer loans is really hard to see from within the organization. And, you know, maybe we've gone too many regulations, maybe they need to be streamlined, but I still think that's part of that drives the risk management that Effie mentioned, and also that kind of, oh, we've got to focus on the customers, and that it doesn't feel like it's supported in the atmosphere, at least in the US. I don't know globally how it
Well,
is.
the one thing I would say to that though, because I really think Rik makes this point, if not specifically, you know, it's implied that regulation isn't a substitute for culture,
True.
right? So
Yeah.
you know, that's part of what we saw with the regulation that had been attempted with open banking and all the rest.
Yep.
That can only get us so far. This book invites bankers of all stripes to kind of reconsider how is your culture supporting a really consumer centric or customer centric delivery of products and services in the digital age. That's what I love about this book.
And one huge area is sustainability, you know, which a lot of people are thinking about or experiencing issues around climate change and things. And I think that's a whole area just right for financial services innovation, not in some grand scheme, but also down at the individual customer level. and there are just so many opportunities there, I think, to innovate what hasn't been done yet.
Right.
You know?
The
I,
great thing about this book is it's a good read. It's an easy read. It's accessible, approachable. If I were a CEO or somebody in a C-suite at a bank or credit union, any financial institution, a fintech, I would spread this book out within the group and get conversations going internally about what this means for your particular institution.
Yeah,
Because I think that's one of the things this book does. It prompts as many questions and as many as opposed to giving you a lot of answers to things. It
yeah.
really kind of gets you thinking.
I
Effie,
would invite, CEOs these days are, some of them are telling their employees, I want you to build an AI agent for yourself by Christmas, right? What if a CEO of a bank was saying, okay, read this book and open a conversation or give me your thoughts of how we, you as a team, as an organization, how can we operationalize that and open that kind of discussion. That would be really a way to show and lead that this is the spirit, and let's co-create this, do it together, because as we said, this is a question of identity and character, right?
right, right. And often so many of these ideas are percolating in different silos, sustainability or inclusion, and they need to be brought together to really bring value for the bank and for customers. I think it's really powerful. I mean, this whole idea of sustainability, I mean, yeah, maybe the words are not acceptable in some places where they used to be, but you can still take the concepts and drive real value because, it's innovation, actual transformation is going to happen whether it's financial institutions or not.
Exactly.
Um,
This actually relates to a book by Chris Skinner. That's an older book. We're reading, currently published, but his book that really, his latest, talks about if you don't take a stance, you're gone as an organization. You have to stand for something. So all this
right.
relates and connects, really.
Yeah.
And,
And if
and
yeah,
go ahead.
if customers perceive you standing for only making money off of their money, I think that customer laziness will move into customer mobility more and more. I mean, because they're like, hey, you're just out for yourselves and I'm out for myself and I'll go somewhere where I'm appreciated.
And we have
I
a
think,
gigantic younger generation right now who's one of the filters they bring to who they do business with has everything to do with sustainability and how your institution is aligning with these values. So it's like you might be able to put these questions off for a generation, but I don't think so.
yeah, that's a long time. That's like 400 years in digital years, right?
I,
Um, so we wanted to wrap up. Any final words? Any final comments? Everybody listening, um, anything you want to say um, to sum up this book?
one of the things
I
that
Go ahead, too.
I was just going to say, one of the things we'll share in the comments on our LinkedIn page is there's an interview that was done recently by Paolo Cerrone with Rik that also gives Rik's kind of impressions and what he was trying to accomplish with the book. So we'll put that link up so you can have access to a conversation. And I think Theo also did a recent interview with Rik, so it's worth the listen.
Go ahead, Effie.
I want to say supercalifragilisticexpialidocious from Mary Poppins. That's how that's how bankers should start thinking a bit of magic with a purpose, right? Whether it is the planet, whether it's mobilizing a community around the cause, hit the area. I mean, we know that I think Bank of America was created out of a big fire. So let's go back to that and inspire people and not have banking in the same sort of category as dentists, and we want to avoid them only if we have to. We have to create that emotional connection and not it be strictly about the finances. We want, if AI can make um, this change the relationship and make it really, can you help me with my dreams, can you help me crystallize my dreams and make them happen as an advisor, if you want, a personal agent. That would be the North Star, and do that not only for me, but also for the planet, for my community, all that. As you said, Jim, this triangle, you can't look at one side. You can't be looking at only yourself, right? And
Right.
not the community and not the context and not the economy, not the whole world. We're all interconnected. So, well, I'd love to thank Rik for this wonderful read, qualitative read, indeed.
And I think that's a perfect note to end our discussion today on magic. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll talk to you in the next quarter. Thanks, and follow our page, and see you at Finovate Fall.
Thank you.